Welcome to a new episode of NextGenNinja. I'm your host, Kory Farooquie. On this show, I interview those innovators, disruptors, futurists that I call NextGen Ninjas. They are the entrepreneurial and enterprise leaders that are building and defining what the world in the future will look like for coming generations. I call them NextGen Ninjas. One of the key traits of an innovator and a disruptor or a NextGen Ninja is the entrepreneurial spirit. It is the ability to see the potential of something that is maybe not mainstream and to really follow your instinct and move forward with it, make it a reality. It's the relentless pursuit of your vision. I call it striking matches. As an entrepreneur with that entrepreneurial spirit, if you see a wet box of matches, you know one of those things is dry. You got to keep striking, keep striking. It's the ability to take those calculated risks and to pick up after a loss and keep marching forward. My guest today is what most of us in this entrepreneurial world would aspire to be. She is the quintessential NextGen Ninja. Her name is Magdalena Yesil, and she is an alpha girl. Magdalena has been active in the Silicon Valley entrepreneurial scene for over 30 years. She is not only one of the pioneers of the commercialization of the internet outside of the confines of the universities and military and government out to the public sphere, but she has a list of accomplishments, just some of which are being selected as Entrepreneur of the Year by Red Herring Magazine. She's the first investor and board of director of Salesforce.com. She has been an early investor in over 30 companies. She founded and successfully exited 3 startups herself. She's also the founder of Broadway Angels. It's a VC firm that combines the experience and knowledge of over 50 female investors. Lastly, she is the author of Power Up, How Smart Women Win in the New Economy, a great book for aspiring women and as well as for men as well. And also she's the focus of Julian Guthrie's new book, Alpha Girls, which is the story of 4 successful women that took on the male-dominated world of the Silicon Valley culture. And incidentally, I just found out is being turned into a TV series with 20 episodes. So Magdalena, welcome to the show. It is just an honor to have you on this show.
Thank you for having me.
So Magdalena, let's start with entrepreneurialism. What got you started down this path of being an entrepreneur?
I became an entrepreneur because I couldn't get a job. I was not one of these people who aspired to be an entrepreneur. I didn't grow up thinking I really want to run my own company. I didn't think that when I was working and had a job. But Silicon Valley has its ups and downs. I'm an engineer. And in the good days in Silicon Valley, everyone gets a job. And when the downturn occurs, basically companies start doing layoffs. So the Valley was going through a difficult time, a downturn. And even though I thought I was so very qualified, no one would offer me a job after interviewing with literally, almost over 100 companies. And I still, not having a job offer, decided to actually create a job for myself. So I became an entrepreneur.
That's great. I always talk about the need for entrepreneurialism is the need to survive, and many times that's sort of the universe telling you, hey, you're one of those people. You don't need this job, and so you've had an amazing career in this entrepreneurial world. Entrepreneurialism has its highs and lows. Was there ever a time where you felt like giving up, and when you did, what got you moving forward again? I love this analogy that you have of water flowing. I always say, one of my favorite quotes of entrepreneurialism is, a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what a ship is made for. So give us a story about the entrepreneurial journey in the lows and what got you kind of back up.
Yeah, but before I do that, let me actually explain to your audience what the water analogy is. So I was born and raised in Turkey, in Istanbul, Turkey. I'm full-blooded Armenian. And I had determined that very early on that I was going to go to the United States for college. And a tradition where I'm from, and actually it turns out the whole Middle East and the Balkans, is that when someone's leaving on a major journey, all of the family, their friends, and their neighbors gather with buckets of water in their hands. And as the person leaves, either in a car or on foot or on ferry, whatever it is, how they're departing their home, everyone throws those buckets of water after the person who's departing. And the symbolism is that may you flow like water, may you get to where you want, and may you when you hit obstacles, may you flow around them or under them, but always move forward towards your destination. So that's the analogy of the water. And really, I think that I've used that throughout my life when things have been very difficult, when I've hit those boulders in my career where everything has stopped me. I feel I have to keep flowing. Maybe I'm not going to reach the exact destination, but I need to keep moving forward and get to a place because there is no going back. Water doesn't turn around and go back, or water doesn't stop. So I have hit multiple lows. The other day, someone asked me, when was the last time you hit a low? I said last Thursday. So it happens. I've had to shut companies down. And I think what keeps me going forward is number one, the need to survive, the need to keep going. And number two, curiosity, because I always want to try something new. I always want to, if this didn't work, let's try the next thing.
Well, it's what a beautiful story. And, I growing up in multiple parts of the world, especially a lot of the Eastern cultures, there's some old traditions that they're just beautiful. And they intersect with life, and the analogies created are so perfect in terms of continuing to move forward and perseveres through the downs. So it's amazing. So one of the things I've just been blown away by is we'll get to the Salesforce thing, but commercialization of the internet. I remember a lot of the audience is much younger. They have seen the internet. They remember dial-up. The next generation today we talk about is Gen Z, which is digital AI native, and they can't imagine a world without AI. Forget the internet. But I remember when the internet came to my university while I was there. What drew you in to commercialize that?
Yeah. So I actually grew up without even telephones. So for me, taking a new technology and seeing how it changes your life was very much part of my childhood because telephone really changed our family, the way we communicated. Anyway, so for me, new technology has always been, even though I grew up in a very different part of the world, how new technology changed my life was kind of the story of my life. So when I was in college, I went to Stanford and I was a master's student in electrical engineering. I used the internet all the time because they were available for universities, for students, to do research, etc. So it was part of my day-to-day life. And then when I graduated and got a job, I became a semiconductor design engineer. My company didn't have access to the internet because we were a commercial entity, not a research entity. I was blown away. I couldn't believe that this phenomenal tool that I got to use at the university was not available for me as an engineer. So what happened was I believe that sooner or later, access to the internet was going to be available to corporations as well. I just knew that. I didn't know when, but I knew that at some point it was going to happen because it was such a pull tool. So when I couldn't get a job in the very early 90s, I decided that I basically make myself an internet expert. I read everything I could. That's when I got involved with the officialize the internet to try to take internet access out of universities and bring it into commercial entities. And Dan Lynch, my co-founder, and I started a company to serve large enterprises in the United States with internet access. So that's how it happened.
It's amazing. So all of you guys, forget your mobile phone, sitting at home. Internet is crucial to now our how we operate. You can thank Magdalena that you have that. But there's another cool story that is part of your Stanford days and before your semiconductor days about being interviewed by a company and not taking that job.
Right. Do you want me to tell you that?
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
I love that story.
Okay, well, it's a funny story because, well, just think of me. I'm a foreign student, right? I don't have a work permit in the United States. I'm getting a undergraduate degree in actually industrial engineering, and I don't get a job offer. And I go to my advisor and I say, what am I going to do? I don't, no one's hiring me. I have good grades. And my advisor says, well, it's because you don't have a work permit in America. And I say, am I doomed? Will I never get a job in this country? And he says, no, just get a master's in electrical engineering and companies will sponsor you. So I enroll, I walk across the campus, I enroll in the EE master's program, and here I am. I'm, one of, I guess we were about a class of 30 people at the time. So these two guys come on campus. They happen to both be named Steve, which I thought was odd. And they ask for people to sign up for interviews because they have a company and they want to interview people and give job offers. So I'm very excited. I sign up. I interview. They actually interview us in the computer center of Stanford. And I get selected as one of the kids who gets a job offer. So I'm totally excited. I can't believe it. I have a job offer in the United States. So I run to my advisor and I say, I got a job offer today. And he says, from whom? I say, from this company called Apple. He looks at me. He says, what kind of company is that? I say, well, it's a computer company. They're going to make computers. They're making computers. He says, what technology company would ever name themselves after a fruit? Why don't you work for a real company, real technology company? I say, like what? He says, like Intel, Fairchild Semiconductor, Advanced Micro Devices, National Semiconductor. Like those are real technology companies, not Apple, a fruit. So I say, okay. So I turned down my Apple job offer.
That's Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Yes, exactly. So I call them and I say, sorry, I'm going to interview for with other companies that are real technology companies. That's what my advisor told me. They're like, okay, whatever, So I end up interviewing with all of the others, end up getting a job at Advanced Micro Devices, keep watching Apple, the fruit company, and they're doing pretty well.
Amazing. What a story. So you start off this life in a career, you get laid off, and you become an entrepreneur. Now, from an entrepreneur, you successfully started a couple of companies, you've exited them successfully, and then you get into the world of venture capitalism. And now you are facing the male-dominated VC world of the Silicon Valley industry. So let's spend a few minutes and talk about that world, the venture capital world. It is also sort of the place where new ideas are coming. They're investing. They're making bets. You only hear about the big successes. As somebody who understands the VC world in the Silicon Valley, what kind of opportunities do you look at when you are determining an opportunity to invest? Is there a gut feeling involved?
Yeah, but before I say, the short answer is yes, absolutely. But before I start elaborating on that, I just want to say that I don't think that the venture business was more male dominated than the semiconductor business or the computer business, or for that matter, my graduating class from Stanford in Masters in Double E. So I went to an all girls high school, so actually junior high and high. So for 7 years, I was in an all girls environment. And then I graduated and showed up in college. And then I was basically in an all boys environment. So I switched the gender specificity. And then my whole career has been amongst mostly men. So I never looked at venture capital or even doubling, electrical engineering jobs and said, these are male dominated jobs. And I said, these are exciting jobs. So I never really focused on the fact that I was the only woman or one of the very few women, because I think if I was on that, I probably would have backed away. Now, as far as your specific question, does it actually take a gut feeling to make an investment decision? And the short answer is yes, because there are so many unknowns. It's not like, oh, you can do analysis. These companies are usually very early stage. The markets might not even exist, or they're just beginning to develop. You cannot really do market sizing analysis. Talking to customers, well, you might talk to potential customers, but as far as real customers, they probably don't exist. So you have to take all of that information into consideration, but at the end of the day, the decision is very much made on a visceral level, at least for me.
The Silicon Valley culture of the VC culture, it's very different than maybe the way investors look at opportunities in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. But it really defines the mentality of tech startups, and really, the models that are created from there are replicated across different parts. So the reason I asked about the gut instinct was because you made an investment that turned into that defined a new genre of technologies, and that's the cloud. So you were the first investor in a company called Salesforce.com, and you became the first board of director there. So tell us about what got you involved with Salesforce, how you helped Mark Benioff build Salesforce, and when you looked at something like the cloud, why didn't you say, "Oh, this is not right"? What was that gut instinct that made you say, this is something that's going to be big, just like the internet?
Well, first of all, there was no cloud to look at to
Right.
make a value judgment on, right? So when I met with Mark Benioff back in late '98, the idea of taking enterprise software functionality, which was already very well defined, right? Siebel Systems had leadership in the area of customer relationship management. And Mark came to me with the idea of, hey, taking the Siebel functionality and shrinking it down to only those functions that people actually use. And then instead of offering it as enterprise software that needs to be implemented on premise of a company, how about we just basically offer it on a web enabled basis, where people just pay for what they're using. They pay on a monthly basis, no contracts. So that concept was so, just like I knew that internet access would someday become totally commercialized, I also knew that enterprise software had to change in the way it delivered itself to corporations and to users. So it was a gut instinct, absolutely, but it was also something that I'd actually been working on myself and believing that the delivery of enterprise software was going to change significantly. So it was very easy for me to say to Mark, yes, Mark, I am with you. I 100% believe this is something that needs to happen. And I'm going to, invest in you, support you, help you hire, help you raise money, do everything I possibly can because I'm behind this. And that's how I normally make my decisions. I already have been working in an area. I already have a hunch. This is how it's going to go. And then I meet an entrepreneur that I really believe in. And it's like, okay, I'm going to work with you. We'll do this together. And that's what happened with Salesforce.
It's such an amazing story. So, you've got this gut instinct, you are educated about that domain, and you look at the ingredient of the entrepreneur in there, their ability to really want to create something like this and challenge the status quo. And those are all traits of what I call, next gen ninjas. They're mavericks, they're explorers, they're risk takers. Can you, as somebody who I believe to be a quintessential next gen ninja, can you define in your terms what it means to be a next gen ninja, and what it means for the audience to be someone like Magdalena Yesil?
Okay, so I'll give it a shot. I think that probably the most important and constant feature across all these next gen ninjas is curiosity. It's people who really want to do something because they want to see how it actually will turn out. Most entrepreneurs are not seeking to make a ton of money. I mean, they'd like to make a ton of money,
Sure.
but that's not the job number one. Job number one is to do something they really believe in to see how it's going to turn out. They actually believe it's going to turn out really well, and they want to execute on that. And I think it's that curiosity that gets you started. And then the 100% determination, the 100% commitment, basically putting all your eggs in the same basket is what keeps you going. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I mean, 9 out of 10 startups fail. So it's not like, oh, it's nirvana, it's so cool to be an entrepreneur. No, it's not like that. It's incredibly hard
Yeah.
and it is very masochistic. But you keep going because you really want to make it work. And you think that yours is going to be it. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
I I always say I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I'd recommend my best friend to do it. It is.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint of heart, and it requires a lot of support from those that are around you, and so it's definitely a journey. And as you mentioned, the journey has some deep lows that make you want to give it up and take the conservative route of a paycheck, which is not a bad route. It's there, but there's a new word that's coming up, which is called intrapreneur, and I don't see intrapreneur as the opposite of entrepreneur, because there's no word such as extrapreneur. When you're an entrepreneur, you're within the company. An entrepreneur is really, it's the spirit. It's the spirit of rolling up your sleeves, being curious. You can work somewhere or you can do it as your own company, but it's really that drive and that curiosity, like you mentioned. So I really appreciate that, and that's I think you've hit the nail right on the head. So let's switch gears for a second and talk about your book, Power Up. As a father of daughters myself, it is so important for me to ensure that my daughters grow up and empower themselves to grow up to be confident and successful and independent women. So what lessons can you give the female audience of the show to kind of persevere and be independent and be successful and really power up? And then more importantly, what advice can you give the male audience of this show?
Well, first of all, to the female audience, don't ever focus on your own agenda and look for discrimination, because if you do, you'll find it, and it's going to really discourage you. So don't make gender matter too much. Know that if you're really good at what you do, if you're fantastic and better than everyone else, you're going to have a seat at the table. And if they don't give you a seat, as they say, pull up a folding chair. You are going to be successful based on your merits, and just make sure that the world knows what you're really good at. So don't let anyone discourage you. Don't feel hurt. Don't look for discrimination, because if you do, it's going to be very discouraging. Just charge forward. Now, to the male audience, I would say, especially to those who are fathers of daughters, you are probably the most influential person in this universe as far as your daughter's success. Encouraging your young girl very early on to have that self-confidence, and encouraging that young girl to actually really focus on having a career, having a job, and sticking with it, no matter who she marries, because I think that women taking themselves out of the workforce is actually one reason why we don't have more women in the management levels of large corporations.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Magdalena, it's been just an amazing discussion, so insightful. We covered everything from entrepreneurialism, being as a key ingredient in being a NextGen Ninja, your amazing, just a couple of your amazing stories, and I know there's so many of Apple's job offer, and then your career's rise. Most importantly, as you stay to the path of innovation and disruption and really focused forward, curiosity is the key ingredient. Today, we have so many different technologies kind of coming forward. You really have to look at that from a curious perspective. You have to understand how AI can impact my industry and my company, and how can I leverage it. And then most importantly, power up, especially to the female audiences. Power up and definitely read the book. And if I can make a quick request from Magdalena to give a signed copy to one of our viewers and our listeners, that would be awesome. So with that, Magdalena, I really appreciate this. So any closing remarks?
So I think that as I close, I will say the same thing that my family said to me as I took off on my journey, and that is, may you flow like water, sometimes calm and sometimes roaring like a waterfall, but always forward. And may you reach the seas you yearn to reach.
What a beautiful way to end this session and this episode. It's been such an insightful discussion. It's been very different than some of the previous episodes. I'm just in awe at Magdalena's success and her insight. To learn more about Magdalena Yesil and what she's accomplished, how to connect, visit the website NextGen.Ninja. There you can see some of the past guests, some of our future guests, read up about them, participate in the discussion. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course YouTube, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Again, hashtag NextGenNinja if you know someone who you think should be on this show and that are defining what the world looks like for future generations. I'm your host, Kory Farooquie. This has been an episode of NextGen Ninja, and as always, stay future focused.